The morning sunlight glanced off the metal of the ramp, warm and quiet against the front of Frank Doyle's house. He stepped out with a mug of coffee, the steam curling up into the cool air. For a moment everything looked still, the trimmed hedges, the asphalt glistening from last night's drizzle, until his eyes caught a flash of orange on the wood near the base of the ramp. A paper, taped tight. HOA violation notice. Frank stared at it for a long second before setting his coffee on the porch rail. He leaned down, joints creaking, and peeled the paper loose. The tape came away with a dry hiss. The letter was printed in neat, bold type, that officious kind of font designed to make you feel small before you even finish reading the first line. Ramp installation violates HOA standards for visual uniformity. Fine, $250 per day, effective immediately. He read it twice, slowly. Once as a homeowner. Again as a man who'd spent half his life reading worse orders in worse handwriting. Then he folded it neatly in half, rubbed his thumb over the embossed HOA seal, and muttered under his breath, "They didn't even ask." Across the street, a car door shut. He looked up. Carla Henley, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched like a crown, was walking toward him. The way she moved said she already owned the outcome. "Good morning, Mr. Doyle," she said, her voice dipped in something meant to sound friendly. "You got our notice, I see." Frank kept his tone even. "I did. You'll need to remove the structure by Friday." She tapped her clipboard twice, the pen already poised to note compliance. "Rules are rules." He nodded just once. "So's the ADA." Her smile twitched, just enough to show the edge beneath it. "We'll see what applies here." She turned before he could respond, heels clicking on the pavement, already calling to someone about community aesthetics. Frank watched her go, the sound of her voice mixing with the low hum of a lawnmower somewhere down the block. From across the yard, his neighbor Rick, shirtless, holding a garden hose, called out quietly, "You can't fight them, man. They'll bury you in letters." Frank glanced over, half smiling. "Then I'll need more ink." He went back inside, the notice still folded in his hand. On the kitchen table lay the morning mail, grocery flyers, a pension statement, a veteran's newsletter. He placed the notice beside them like another piece of enemy intel and sat down. He'd built that ramp himself, using scrap aluminum and cedar slats. Not for decoration. For necessity. His right knee hadn't bent properly since Mosul. The ramp let him leave the house without leaning on someone else. To anyone else, it was just a slope of wood and metal. To him, it was independence. He picked up his coffee again, now lukewarm, and stared out the window. Carla's SUV glided past the curb. She didn't look his way, but the sight of that clipboard on her lap made something settle in him. Not anger, just a kind of cold focus he hadn't felt in years. He stood, walked back outside, and examined the notice more closely. There was another paper pinned beneath it, a flyer for the HOA board meeting. Thursday, 6 p.m. The date circled in red marker. Frank took out his phone and snapped a photo of both pages. The camera click echoed faintly off the siding. Then he folded the papers again, slipped them into his back pocket, and looked once more at the ramp. Sunlight glinting off the bolts, clean, solid, perfectly safe. "They picked the wrong fight," he murmured. The breeze shifted. Somewhere behind him, a door creaked open and shut. A dog barked 2 houses down. Ordinary sounds, steady and familiar. The kind that made people think everything was fine. But Frank's hand lingered over the phone in his pocket, thumb resting on the camera app. Tomorrow's date on that flyer burned in his mind like a countdown. He took one last sip of his coffee, set the mug down on the porch rail again, and watched the HOA president's car turn the corner out of sight. The street fell silent, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It was the kind that comes right before something breaks. The folding chairs creaked like old bones every time someone shifted. The air inside the HOA hall smelled faintly of burnt coffee and cheap disinfectant. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their flicker catching on a wall of framed photos, rows of smiling board members who looked far too pleased with themselves. Frank stepped through the door quietly, cane tapping once against the linoleum floor. Heads turned. Conversations dimmed. A few whispers fluttered at the edges of the room, the kind that try to hide but never quite do. He took a slow breath, steady. Every eye followed him as he made his way to the back row. Carla Henley sat at the front, framed by a table of neatly stacked binders and a small nameplate that read President. Her smile was polished enough to catch the light, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Ah, Mr. Doyle," she said, tapping her pen once against the clipboard. "We're so glad you could make it." Frank nodded slightly. Didn't want to miss the show. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone chuckled softly, then caught themselves. Carla's smile thinned. She shuffled her papers and cleared her throat. "Let's proceed. Item 3 on the agenda. Unauthorized construction. Frank's ramp." They dressed it up with bureaucratic language, but everyone knew what this was about. Carla read from the sheet with the confidence of someone who believed the rules existed solely to protect her authority. As per HOA aesthetic guidelines, any modification to exterior property requires pre-approval from the board. Failure to obtain such approval constitutes a violation. We've already issued one notice. Frank raised his hand slightly. "Madam President, if I may." Carla didn't look up. "Comments from non-board members will be addressed during open floor time." He waited. "And when's that?" She smiled, saccharine. "After votes are finalized." He nodded, eyes calm. "Of course. Wouldn't want to interrupt the sentencing." Someone coughed into their hand to hide a laugh. Carla's pen froze midair. Frank eased himself into a chair near the aisle and placed his phone face down on his thigh. The screen glowed for a second, recording. His hat brim dipped low, shadowing the gesture. Carla continued reading, voice crisp. "Given the lack of compliance and continued presence of the structure, I propose we raise the fine to $500 per day, effective immediately. Do I have a second?" A hand shot up before she finished the question. Another followed. The board moved like clockwork. No hesitation, no discussion. "All in favor?" Carla said. Hands went up again, in unison. "Opposed?" Silence. "Motion carried," she said, closing the folder with a soft snap. A couple of residents clapped lightly, the kind of applause that meant more "we approve of you" than "we agree with the law." Frank exhaled through his nose. "Impressive efficiency," he said quietly, just loud enough for the front table to hear. Carla looked up. "Is there something you'd like to add, Mr. Doyle?" "Only that integrity starts with honesty and law," he replied evenly. "Not with groupthink and fear." The room tensed. A younger board member shifted uncomfortably and muttered, "You're out of order." Frank smiled faintly. So was Rosa Parks. That earned a few raised eyebrows, even a nervous snicker from someone in the corner. Carla straightened her blazer, maintaining composure by force. "This meeting is not a courtroom," she said tightly. "We don't debate personal issues here. You were warned, you ignored it, and now the process continues. We're not the enemy, Mr. Doyle, we're just enforcing the standards everyone agreed to." He tilted his head. "Everyone, or just you?" Carla's jaw flexed, but she didn't answer. Instead, she tapped the microphone. Meeting adjourned. The scraping of chairs filled the room. Papers rustled, voices rose, gossip low and quick like insects in dry grass. Frank waited a moment before standing. His knee ached, but he made sure not to lean too heavily on the cane. As he passed the front table, Carla avoided his eyes, busy pretending to reorganize her note. One of the board members muttered something about setting an example. Frank stepped out into the hallway, the hum of the fluorescent lights following him until the door clicked shut. The night air was cool, mercifully quiet. He took a deep breath, letting it out slow. Behind the door, voices muffled, laughter, a woman's low whisper. He caught just a few words through the crack before it swung closed completely. "He won't last a month." Frank paused on the steps, the corner of his mouth twitching. "We'll see," he murmured. Then he started toward home, cane tapping a steady, patient rhythm against the concrete, the sound of a man who'd fought worse and wasn't planning to stop now. The clock on the kitchen wall ticked loud against the stillness. Outside, the street was dark, that deep, late-hour quiet when even the crickets have given up. Frank sat at the table, a single desk lamp casting a cone of yellow light over the cluttered wood surface. Coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he didn't notice. His eyes were fixed on the glowing screen in front of him. The HOA bylaws were written in dense legal jargon, paragraph after paragraph of small print pretending to be authority. Frank scrolled slowly, lips tightening as he read each section twice. He'd learned long ago that the people who hide behind power always count on no one else reading the fine print. "Every battle starts with intel," he muttered, reaching for his notebook. His handwriting was slow but deliberate, section numbers, contradictions, missing signatures. He flipped between tabs, cross-referencing with county code and ADA regulations, every click of the mouse echoing in the quiet room like the sound of loading a rifle. On one tab, the ADA's accessibility standard. On another, county property modification statute. Then the HOA charter, or rather, what was supposed to be their charter. Frank's eyes narrowed. The document was stamped renewed 2018. No updates. No renewal filings. Nothing for 2023 or 2024. He leaned back, staring at the line for a long moment. "Outdated 2 years," he murmured. "That's not authority, that's negligence." A slow satisfaction crept through him, quiet but solid. He reached for the printer. The hum filled the kitchen as the pages began to slide out, one after another, proof made physical. He stacked them neatly, squared the edges, then slipped them into clear sleeves inside a black binder labeled in neat, block letters. Evidence, Exhibit A. It was the same careful motion he'd used years ago, prepping mission brief. Same rhythm. Different battlefield. He opened a new email draft. The subject line blinked on the screen. Requesting ADA Accommodation Compliance Review. His fingers moved with purpose now, the stiffness in his wrist forgotten. To whom it may concern, I am writing to report a potential ADA violation by the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. Their enforcement of property restrictions is currently targeting accessibility modifications, specifically a wheelchair ramp installed at my residence. He attached photos of the ramp, copies of the violation notice, and the HOA's own bylaws, including the outdated charter. His tone was clinical, polite, but every word carried the weight of quiet fury. He clicked send. A second later, his inbox chimed. An automated reply. Case opened. Expect inspection. That was all he needed for now. The county would come. They'd see for themselves. Frank sat back, rubbing his temples. The desk lamp buzzed softly above him, dust specks drifting through the air. On the counter, the shadows of file folders stretched long and thin like cracks across the kitchen wall. He stood, stretched, and poured himself the last of the cold coffee. It tasted bitter, metallic, but it grounded him. He moved through the small kitchen, double-checking the locks, the blinds, the files stacked in order. Each one labeled, cross-referenced, dated. Years in the service had trained him to work quietly, efficiently, without needing an audience. Every detail mattered. Every timestamp. Every email backup. He wasn't just defending himself, he was building a case that would hold. By the time the clock struck 2, the binder was full. HOA bylaws, county code, ADA sections, and correspondence logs. The weight of it felt good in his hands, not just paper, but leverage. He placed it carefully in the center of the table, beside his phone. The glow from the screen caught the edge of the metal binding. For a moment, the house felt peaceful again. Then the phone buzzed. Once. Then again. Frank frowned, picked it up, and unlocked the screen. It was an automated alert from the HOA app, the same one they used for payment processing and announcements. Fine update. Current violation penalty increased to $500 per day. Effective immediately. He stared at the words for a long, silent moment. Then his jaw set. The glow from the screen reflected in his eyes, sharp and steady. He didn't curse. Didn't move. Just let the message hang there until the screen dimmed to black. Finally, he set the phone down, flipped the binder shut, and said softly, "Good. Let's see how deep they want to dig." The sun was high and sharp that afternoon, the kind that made the aluminum on Frank's ramp shimmer like a blade. He was on the porch, oiling the hinges of his screen door, when a white SUV rolled to a stop out front. No logos, no county plates, just a magnetic decal slapped on the side that read HOA Compliance Division. Two men stepped out wearing reflective vests and mirrored sunglasses. One carried a clipboard, the other a tape measure that dangled like a prop more than a tool. They moved with the swagger of people who expected doors to open before they knocked. "Mr. Doyle," the taller one called, his tone clipped, professional in the way telemarketers rehearse professionalism. "We're here to conduct an inspection on your property." Frank straightened slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. "Inspection? For your ramp," the man said, tapping his clipboard. "We've received multiple reports of non-compliance with community standard. We're here to take measurements." Frank studied them in silence for a beat too long. Both men wore badges clipped to their vests, shiny enough to catch the light but not quite right. The printing was fuzzy, the emblem generic. And on the shorter man's badge, one word stood out: complaints. He felt a small, grim smile tug at his mouth. "Sure thing," he said evenly. "Can I see your IDs up close?" The taller one flashed the badge quickly, flipping it open and shut before Frank could read the text. "You've seen it," the man said. Frank's voice stayed level. "I'd like to read it, not just glimpse it." The second man crossed his arms. "We don't have time for games, sir. We're authorized to perform this inspection with or without your cooperation." Frank tilted his head slightly. "County inspectors carry laminated IDs with barcode. Yours looks like something printed on a home office HP." The man's jaw tightened. "Watch your tone." "I'm watching your spelling," Frank said, nodding toward the badge. "Compliance has 2 E's." The shorter one flushed red. "Don't get smart with us." "I'm not getting smart," Frank said calmly. "I'm staying legal." He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and tapped the record button. The faint chime was deliberate, audible. "Could you please repeat your names for documentation?" The tall one took a step closer, squaring his shoulders. "You're obstructing a lawful inspection. We can add that to your fines." "That's interesting," Frank said. "Because according to the ADA and County Accessibility Code, no private entity can inspect or fine for a mobility accommodation. Only county officers can." A breeze stirred the hedges. From across the street, blinds shifted. Mrs. Feldman's face appeared briefly behind her curtain before vanishing again. 2 houses down, a man with a lawnmower paused mid-strip, pretending to adjust the throttle while listening. The shorter fake inspector muttered something under his breath. The taller one sighed, gesturing toward the ramp. "Look, sir, we can make this simple. We just need to verify measurements and take some photos. Let us do our job and we'll be out of your way." Frank didn't move. "You've already lied twice," he said quietly. "That's enough work for one day." The man's fake badge caught the light again, and for the first time, his confidence cracked. His voice rose. "This isn't a negotiation." "Neither is trespassing," Frank replied. "And you're about 10 seconds from it." The silence that followed was heavy, drawn tight between them. Somewhere a dog barked, and the hum of an approaching engine rolled up the street. The taller man shifted, checking his clipboard as if it were a shield. Then came the sound, deep tires crunching against asphalt. A black county SUV turned the corner, official seal gleaming on the door. The 2 men froze. Frank didn't. He glanced down at his phone screen to make sure it was still recording, then looked back up, his voice steady as ever. "Looks like your backup's here," he said. The SUV pulled to the curb, engine idling low. The window rolled down, revealing a county inspector in uniform, sunglasses glinting. He looked directly at the two men standing on Frank's lawn. One of them took a half-step back. Frank folded his arms, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. "Gentlemen," he said softly, "you might want to double-check your jurisdiction before you finish that clipboard report." The taller one swallowed hard. The shorter man mumbled something about a mix-up. The real county inspector opened his door, stepping out onto the street. And for the first time all afternoon, it was the fake inspector's turn to sweat. The county SUV rolled to a stop with a low growl, dust curling up around its tires. The fake inspectors froze where they stood, clipboard hanging limp, mouths half open like they were about to talk but forgot the words. Frank stayed still on his porch, one hand resting on his cane, the other still holding his phone. The door of the SUV swung open. A uniformed county officer stepped out, calm and deliberate, like someone who had seen 1,000 lies before breakfast. His badge caught the sunlight, County Code Enforcement Division. No paper, no typos, no pretense. He looked between the two men in vests. "Names?" The taller one stammered. We're with the..." The officer raised a hand. "Save it. Show me your IDs." Both men hesitated. One fumbled in his pocket, pulling out the same fake badge Frank had already spotted earlier, the one with Complaints Division spelled wrong. The officer's brow furrowed. He took the badges, turned them over, and let out a small, incredulous laugh. "Printed on copier paper," he said flatly. "You two just impersonated county officials. That's a felony." The shorter one's face drained of color. We were instructed by the HOA." The officer's tone didn't change. "Then you'd better hope they like paying your legal fees." Frank said nothing. He simply hit the side button on his phone, stopping the recording, then saved it to his drive. Around the neighborhood, blinds lifted. Curtains parted. A few neighbors had come out to the sidewalk, phones already up, recording every second. The air was heavy, the kind that hums before thunder. And that's when Carla arrived. Her silver crossover skidded to the curb, tires crunching against the edge of the pavement. She stepped out fast, heels clicking, sunglasses flashing. "Excuse me," she barked. "What exactly is going on here?" The officer turned toward her, unimpressed. "You must be Miss Henley." Carla straightened her blazer like armor. "I'm the president of this association. These men are performing a community inspection, as per protocol." The officer's tone stayed level, but his words landed like a hammer. "Ma'am, you're trespassing on federal ADA jurisdiction." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. "This ramp," he continued, pointing toward the structure behind Frank, "falls under accessibility compliance. Not curb appeal, not color palettes, not HOA preference. You have zero authority to interfere." Carla took a step forward. "We were following procedure." "Your procedure's illegal," he said, cutting her off. The crowd murmured, the sound of quiet judgment turning sharp. A teenager whispered, "She's done." Phones lifted higher. Someone zoomed in. The officer flipped through the clipboard the fake inspector had dropped. "No signatures. No permit. No authority. You forged inspection credentials and threatened a disabled veteran with financial penalties. Did I miss anything?" Carla's voice cracked slightly. "You don't understand. The board expects us to maintain standards. The bylaws." "Your bylaws expired 2 years ago," Frank said, finally speaking. His voice was calm, steady, but it sliced through the air. Section 4. Charter renewal lapsed in 2023. The officer turned to him. "You knew that?" Frank nodded. "Documented it. Sent to county compliance 3 nights ago." The officer smiled faintly, just for a second. "Good work, Mr. Doyle. I've reviewed your photos and emails. Your ramp's not only compliant, it's exemplary." He turned back to Carla, whose face had gone pale. "You've interfered with a federal accommodation and attempted to enforce non-existent authority. You'll need to come with me for questioning. What? You can't. Ma'am, he said, voice cutting clean through her protest. Step aside before I add resisting. The fake inspectors shuffled awkwardly toward the SUV, heads down. Carla stood frozen, her clipboard clutched like a shield. The officer gestured toward her car. You'll follow us to the county office. Carla finally snapped, pointing a shaking finger toward Frank. You think you've won? You embarrassed this entire community. Frank met her glare, unflinching. No, he said quietly. You did. The murmurs rose to a low hum of agreement. Someone clapped once. Another joined. Within seconds, the sound spread, soft but steady, like rain starting on a roof. The officer guided Carla toward her vehicle. The two fake inspectors sat silently in the back seat of the county SUV, faces gray. As the convoy started down the street, the crowd lingered, phones still raised, whispers rolling from porch to porch. Frank stayed on his front steps, cane in hand, watching the cars fade down the road. The ramp gleamed in the afternoon sun, a simple, sturdy line of metal and wood. Proof that decency didn't need permission. Then, from behind him, a neighbor's voice broke the silence. Frank, they're actually taking her in. He didn't turn around. Just nodded once, eyes fixed on the road. Yeah, he said quietly. And this time, it's not me paying the fine. The next evening, the air in the HOA park felt different, heavy with the kind of quiet that follows a storm. Folding chairs were lined up in neat rows under the shade of the oak trees, but the crowd filling them wasn't talking the way they used to. No gossip, no whispers about that veteran on Maple Drive. Just low murmurs, eyes darting to the front where the HOA board sat looking smaller than usual behind their folding table. Carla's chair was empty. A thin paper sign rested against it, resigned, effective immediately. Frank stood off to the side, cane in hand, watching it all unfold. He didn't sit. He didn't need to. The county citation was already public record. Harassment, ADA interference, and impersonation of officials. Every word of it was a nail in the board's coffin. The HOA vice president, a man who used to avoid meeting Frank's eyes, now looked like he hadn't slept. He cleared his throat, voice tight around the edges. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge some mistakes made under prior leadership. Someone in the crowd muttered, mistakes? She tried to fine a veteran for a ramp. The man flinched but pressed on. The county has issued a citation, and we've been directed to comply fully with their findings. Effective immediately, all fines against Mr. Doyle are void. He will also receive full reimbursement for prior penalties and legal fees. The sound that followed wasn't applause, not yet. It was more like air leaving a room, the slow exhale of a neighborhood realizing they'd watched something wrong happen in daylight and done nothing. Frank's gaze stayed steady. He didn't smirk, didn't gloat. He just nodded once. The man gestured awkwardly. Mr. Doyle, would you like to say a few words? Frank stepped forward, the soft tap of his cane breaking the hush. When he spoke, his voice was low, calm, the kind that made people lean in without realizing. I moved here because I liked the quiet, he said. Didn't think I'd have to fight to keep it. He paused, scanning the faces, the same ones that used to turn away on trash day or whisper behind hedges. Some of you thought I was being difficult. Some thought it wasn't your fight. But rights aren't just personal, they're contagious. When you let someone take one, they start looking for the next. The vice president shifted uncomfortably, but no one interrupted. I didn't build that ramp to prove a point, Frank continued. I built it so I could leave my house without asking for help. So I could keep some dignity. That's all any of us want, to live quietly, without someone pretending they know better. A long silence followed. Then a man in the back, the same neighbor who'd once warned, "You can't fight them," stood up, hat in hand. His voice cracked just slightly. Didn't think anyone could stand up to them. Frank looked at him, then the rest of the crowd. You just have to stand long enough, he said. That line hung in the air, settling on every face like dust in sunlight. A camera flash cut through the moment. A young journalist near the front, press badge glinting, lowered her phone. "Mr. Doyle," she said, her tone careful, "what will you do next?" He half smiled. "Probably finish my coffee while it's still hot." Laughter rippled softly through the crowd, genuine this time. The tension eased, and someone started clapping. It spread quickly, hesitant at first, then stronger, until the whole park was filled with it. The same people who'd once crossed the street to avoid him were now applauding him like a man who'd just returned from a long campaign. Frank didn't bow or wave. He just let the sound roll over him, quiet pride settling deeper than any words could reach. The meeting ended not with ceremony, but with relief. People lingered afterward, coming up to shake his hand, to say they'd always had his back. He nodded politely, knowing most hadn't. But that wasn't the point anymore. As the crowd thinned, he turned toward home. The sky was burning gold above the rooftops, the same ramp catching the light like a medal. When he reached his porch, there was mail waiting, a single envelope, heavy cream paper, county seal embossed in blue. He tore it open, eyes scanning the words. Settlement offer, County versus HOA Board. Frank exhaled through his nose, a small smile forming. For the first time in months, he didn't feel like the one under investigation. The morning light came soft and golden, sliding across the porch rail and spilling over the stack of mail at Frank's feet. The neighborhood was quiet, lawn sprinklers ticking, a few birds tracing slow loops in the air. For the first time in months, there was no tension sitting heavy in his chest. Just the steady hum of a normal morning. He picked up the envelope at the top of the pile, thicker than the rest, official seal pressed deep into the paper. County Office of Civil Compliance. His thumb paused at the edge before tearing it open. Inside a check. Pay Frank Doyle. Memo line. Settlement, damages and distress. He read the number twice. It wasn't small. Not fortune money, but more than enough to cover every fine, every legal fee, every late-night hour spent fighting people who'd mistaken arrogance for authority. He set the check on the porch table, next to his coffee, and stared at it for a long moment. The air smelled faintly of cut grass. Across the street, a neighbor he didn't know well raised a cautious hand in greeting. Frank nodded back. He didn't celebrate, didn't even smile. He just stood there, breathing in the quiet that he'd earned inch by inch. By noon, the check was deposited. He signed the back with the same careful precision he used to sign mission reports years ago. Then he opened his laptop, typed in a familiar name, Veterans Accessibility Foundation, and donated half. He didn't think twice about it. Justice wasn't about winning, it was about balance. That afternoon, a knock sounded on his door. Not the sharp, entitled kind he'd come to dread. A softer one, hesitant. Frank opened it to find a man in a navy polo standing on the step, hands clasped in front of him. "Mr. Doyle," he said, voice low. "I'm Mark Taylor. I'm the new HOA president." Frank studied him for a second. Younger, maybe mid-40s. No clipboard, no badge, no smirk. Just a man carrying the weight of someone else's mess. "We're trying to rebuild things," Mark said. "Clean slate. The county's made it clear we've got a lot to fix." He shifted awkwardly. "I wanted to apologize personally for what you went through." Frank stepped outside, letting the screen door click shut behind him. The sunlight bounced off the metal of the ramp, almost too bright to look at. "Apologies noted," he said evenly. Mark nodded, swallowing. "We want to make things right. Maybe start community meetings again. Real ones, open to everyone. No more intimidation. No more fake rules." Frank leaned on his cane, eyes on the ramp. "You want to rebuild trust," he said quietly. "Start with respect." Mark nodded again, slowly this time, as if the words carried more weight than he expected. "We will," he said. "And thank you for standing up when the rest of us didn't." When he left, the silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. Frank looked down the street. Neighbors mowing lawns, kids riding bikes, a woman walking her dog who waved as she passed. He waved back this time. Then, from across the sidewalk, a small voice called out, "Hey, Mr. Doyle." It was the kid from 2 houses down, baseball cap backwards, bike tipped against his leg. "Your ramp's cool," he said, grinning. Frank chuckled, the sound rough from disuse. "Glad someone thinks so. It looks like something from a race track," the kid added, before pedaling off down the block. Frank turned back toward the porch. The ramp gleamed in the sunlight, every bolt and rail perfectly aligned. Not just a ramp anymore, a quiet reminder that patience beats power when you know what you're standing on. He picked up his empty coffee mug and started toward the door, content for once to just let the day drift. The fight was over, the balance restored. But as he reached for the handle, the low hum of an engine drew his attention. A black SUV rolled slowly down the street, the same model Carla used to drive. Tinted windows, gliding too slow to be casual. Frank's hand paused on the door. The SUV crept past his curb, hesitated for a second, then moved on. He watched until it turned the corner, the faint reflection of sunlight fading from its rear window. Then, finally, he went inside. The door closed behind him with a soft click, but the quiet wasn't quite the same.